Hey, well, welcome everyone, including all the folks online on, is it Facebook Live? In addition to Zoom. I'm James Clevenger, City Administrator for City of Oak Ridge. I'm going to let the folks up here introduce themselves as well and their role in all of this, starting with Councilor Brewer.
I am Councillor Kelly Brewer. I've been on council for a little over a year, and I've been a member of this community for almost 20. And I'm a fan of the new charter as well as star voting. So I'm here to help with any questions you guys might have.
I'm Matthew McNatt. I was the chair of the Charter Review Committee, and I'm a citizen of Oak Ridge, not an elected official, and happy to be here to, again, answer any questions you all might have and present a little bit on the website behind the charter that is pretty comprehensive to answer questions as well.
I'm Sarah Wolf, and I'm the executive director of the Equal Vote Coalition, which is an Oregon-based nonprofit working on better elections, more fair representative elections. So I was brought on as an expert to talk about voting method reform by the Charter Commission, and then stayed on to help once they referred it to the ballot.
I'm Jake Kajoya. I've been on and off again residents here since 2017. I am campaign manager for these two ballot initiatives. You might see me on initiative.
Awesome. Yeah, so we have two issues to discuss tonight, and you've got some information in front of you. We're going to first talk about the proposed new city charter, and then we'll move on to star voting. And the third piece of paper in your packet is actually a ballot, so everyone can try star voting. So if you want to fill out this ballot for your favorite pets, ranking all of these pets, you may do so, and then we'll talk about it once we get to the star voting section of the presentation. All right, so we'll start with the new city charter. The basic question that everyone asks is, why are we changing the city charter? Well, because it's old. The last time it was updated was 2010, but those were just some updates to it. This is a total revamp. And what I mean by that is we brought it in line with the League of Oregon Cities draft charter so that it flows better and it uses a lot less antiquated language that the city paying a lot of money multiple times a year to get interpretations of what antiquated words meant, and there's some conflicting provisions in the charter, and so our city attorney would have to make a legal opinion on which one is more important, and so we're going to save a lot of money there. There's also the money saving measures, saving almost $2,000 a year by eliminating the requirement for bonds for certain city officials, including myself. And generally, bonds are a good idea. You know, if I embezzle money from the city, there should be a way to get that money back. But we have that through our insurance with CIS, and it's required. So having the bond is double coverage, and it's only up to $50,000, whereas our insurance is up to $2 million per person. So I mean, we would never tap into it unless someone embezzled $2 million and $50,000. We could get that extra $50,000. So it's just, we're just throwing money away because it's required in the old charter. But back then, you know, we didn't have CIS insurance, so it made sense. Other highlights, you know, the committee met for over 2 years to do this, and in the last 6 months, they were meeting twice a month for sometimes 3 hours at a time. The amount of work the committee put in is really commendable. Sometimes we'd get through one paragraph, but really did a lot of due diligence, which is outlined in the website that Matt will explain here in a minute and show you live, so you can see and compare the old charter, the new charter, and then explanations as to why the changes have been recommended. So there's really not a lot that's like earth-shattering here. You know, we've kept the term limits. but clarified them a little bit. And what was really important to the committee was citizen involvement. So we were requiring video recordings of all public meetings, including committee meetings, not just city council, make those available to the public. Right now, that's not required by state law. State law just requires minutes of the meeting, which can kind of be bare bones and you don't really know what happens. It doesn't flesh it out with the recording, which we already do for city council meetings. We do for some committees. We're just requiring it. It also mandates that the public will have a chance for public comment at the beginning of every city council meeting. Under state law, it's just required that it's in there somewhere. So a lot of cities will put it at the end of the meeting. So the decisions have already been made. And now citizens can do public comment, but they can't affect the vote. It's already occurred. So we're mandating in the new charter that it occur beginning of the meeting before those decisions are made. So citizens can say, hey, this is my opinion on what you're about to vote on, rather just reacting to what council decided to do. We also made a requirement that if council wants to have an emergency ordinance, it requires a 2/3 vote to designate it an emergency. You'll notice that the state legislature, pretty much every bill they write is considered emergency, effective immediately. There really needs to be some time to reflect on what has been passed. So we have ensured that will take place. Now, obviously, there will be some emergencies, but that's why it requires a 2/3 vote. It also lowers the threshold considerably for citizen initiatives and referendums to get on the ballot. A lot of citizens don't know, but you actually have the power to, write your own ordinance, basically, go around and get signatures and have something put on the ballot for the people to decide rather than having to rely on city council to do it. Because sometimes council may not be pushing for things that you want to have done. So right now under state law, it requires, what's the percentage?
It's 15% of registered voters.
Of registered voters. We've changed it to 15% of actual voters in the last mayoral election, because not everybody votes, as we know.
Yeah.
So now you only need 15% of, let's say, 1,000 people versus 15% of 2,000 people, because only 1,000 actually voted, even though there's 2,000 registered voters. So you need less signatures to get something on the ballot. Again, putting the power back to the people.
And that's important given our history in Oregon. Most states don't have this sort of citizen referendum and citizen initiative process, but it's guaranteed to us as Oregon citizens in the Oregon Constitution. And when that was passed, the 15% of registered voters was about 15% of the people who would be voting, because you registered to vote if you wanted to vote. But what happened with motor voter, it's fairly recently, was that lots more people were registered to vote who had no intention of voting and don't vote. So the effect of motor voter was to just de facto increase that threshold guaranteed to us by the Oregon Constitution to be able to do citizen initiatives and citizen referendums. So as a charter review committee, we wanted to say, hey, this is precious. As Oregonians, we value this and we want to hold on to it, and not just hold on to it by the letter, but hold on to it by the spirit, to say let's still keep this doable for citizens who want to take that upon themselves.
Just to add a tiny thing, that's also very standard. Most home rule cities around the state do it the way that we're moving to do it here. So yeah, active voters is kind of the standard for other cities as well.
And again, that goes back to trying to bring us more in line with the League of Oregon Cities model charter. Yes, so, into the future, but still having, some Oak Ridge flavor to it, including the term limits. et cetera, because that was definitely popular. That was put in the last time we made charter amendments, so kept those. And other little tweaks like making the council president, who's basically, will take over if the mayor's not able to attend a meeting, having council elect that person every year rather than every 2 years. That way you're not locked into one person every year to make sure that. I mean, it could be the same person 2 years in a row,
Right.
but it allows for that change. Yeah, so again, a lot of work put into this, a lot of great work. And then Matt did a bunch more work by creating this website that hopefully we can screen share.
Let's see here.
I think I allowed everyone to share.
All right. So the website here is charter.oakridge.city. Because this website collects no information from you, it collects no cookies, doesn't do any collection of data from you when you browse it. There is no need for a security certificate for the website. We're not gathering any information. So the start of the website is just HTTP:// not HTTPS. So if you click on the link from Facebook, just sort of heads up, it will look broken because Facebook automatically puts in HTTPS for websites with that security certificate, because most websites collect data from the people browsing them. This one isn't, so that was not necessary. So you may have to delete that little S if you're trying to get to it from a Facebook click. But otherwise, this goes through a lot of background of what is a city charter, and you can just click on that.
Can you make that bigger somehow? You struggled with this last. Or is it? Or is it a view thing, Jake?
Who's the admin on the Zoom call?
Jake is as well. And you can, maybe up in the right hand top, there's the view. I don't
Yeah.
know.
You can change it up there.
Sorry, I didn't.
No worries.
Maybe
I'm not doing such a-
I'll work on it. Sorry.
But the website goes into really every single question that I was thinking people might have over about what a city charter is. It's an important legal document. The city charter establishes how all government decisions in the city must be made. How does a city charter come to be? It comes to be when a group of citizens living in close proximity petitions a state government to incorporate as a city. They need the city charter to establish how all government decisions must be made. And how is it revised? And it goes into that. It goes into the process that we use. So we're an independent citizen committee, and it mentions the people who helped us along the way, the guests who came, and that our operation was all transparent. So really any question that you have about the charter and how the revisions took place is here. One of the things that I think is important about our operation was that we operated sociocratically, which is a big word, but it just means that all of the decisions we made, 100% of them, were made by consent, which means that every person on the committee had to be okay with what was proposed. Not that all of us were gung-ho about it and liked it, okay, but that all of us said, hey, yeah, I think that the voters would be okay with this. So for instance, there was talk of with term limits. Do we want to keep term limits? Do we not? And part of that discussion was, well, voters already expressed an opinion on this. Voters valued the term limits. So the term limits stayed in. There was other talk of changes that could be made. And each time it went back to, hey, this isn't about what we want. This is about what we think the citizens would feel, yeah, this is good enough to go forward. It's safe enough to try, possible to do with integrity. And that was, so it wasn't a matter of some of us supporting a particular proposal and then driving that through. We were not operating by Robert's Rules of Order. So that wasn't just majority rules. So if you look at the draft text of the city charter, that's happens, you know, on the website after you browse down and get to the draft text. You can see up top that you can access the current charter to compare what changes have been made. And then all the rest of this is the text of the proposed charter. You can hover over any section, for instance, preamble, what has been changed. And you can see what changes are there. So we omitted a reference to Lane County, Oregon. Why do we do that? Well, because cities in Oregon get their power to govern themselves from the state, not from the county. So that was just a way to reflect. This is where the power to implement a charter comes from. We specified that Oak Ridge is a home rule city, and we more closely mirrored the preamble language of the League of Oregon Cities 2018 model charter. Why are the changes important? So literally it goes through here was the rationale that the committee used for each of these changes. So I put this together because we did put a lot of work as a committee into reasoning these things through. And it was transparent. All of our meetings are recorded. They're all available on YouTube. But just because something is transparent doesn't mean that it's easily digestible. So I wanted to make sure that that our work would be easy for anyone in the public to go and say, there's this one change. I'm curious about it. Why did that happen? And it's possible on the website to browse through and very quickly get an answer to that. Yeah.
Yeah, so another highlight that I forgot to mention is some financial accountability. We're requiring 2 signatures on every check. One has to be by a city councilor, usually the mayor, but if the mayor's not there, council president, and one by city staff, either myself or the finance director. That way you got 2 signatures and also one from staff, one from council. And that's what we've been doing in practice, but it's not in the charter, so it's not required. In the new charter, it's going to be required, just in case there's change of leadership and people don't want to follow the current policy. It solidifies that. But yeah, I mean, this website's really amazing when you go through it, because it just explains every single change, what the discussion was and why. Super helpful. But I think at this point we can probably open up to questions. If anyone has any questions about the charter, and then once we've done covering the charter, we can move on to start voting. And if there are questions online, Chrissy, I don't know if people can ask on. Okay, if they do, let me know.
And I'll caution you ahead of time that if you ask a question about the charter, that I'm going to go to the same source right here to answer it that you already have accessible to you. And I'll see, hey, what does the website tell us already? Because it's really thorough. And then if the question still persists, we'll be happy to tackle it together. Yes.
If there are questions online and we're not satisfied with what we're getting for an answer, how easy is it to get a hold of somebody to help us understand?
Sure. You're welcome to contact me personally. If you post to the Oak Ridge chat on Facebook, I'll also likely reply there.
Yeah, same with me. My cards are up there, but if you just go to the city website, city administrator, emails all over the place on there, but yeah, happy to answer those questions. And I should mention, so the committee had about what, 15 people on it in total throughout the 2.5 years.
Yep, that's fine.
Probably a hardcore group of about 6 that stuck with it. Some people were on it and then moved outside city limits, like Sarah Altman's Pope. It was another attorney. She was great to have on it, but then she moved outside city limits, High Prairie. So technically she couldn't be on it anymore. Former mayor Kathy Holston was on it. I'm never going to think of all the names, but yeah. So and I was on it, the city administrator as kind of an advisory level, and Dawn Kenyon was the appointed city councilor. She couldn't be here tonight. Councilor Brewer has stepped in to fill that void. Much appreciated. Big shoes to fill.
We have a
This is a core group. Yeah.
I had both a statement and a question. I just wanted to agree with what James said earlier. We have spent thousands upon thousands of dollars in attorney fees, using them for clarification of the charter. And I wholeheartedly agree that the charter revisions and updates that this group has come forward with is really going to help clean that up a lot. And then my next question is about the citizen initiative thing. So currently, in our current charter, citizens don't have the ability to put something on ballot or an ordinance, but with this new charter, they will.
The citizens already have that authority as a matter of being Oregonians. But it's not referenced in our charter. There's no guidance in the charter. One of the other changes that the new charter makes is it actually requires the city to maintain a list of people who would be willing to help residents with initiatives or referendums. So that even though I'm not serving on council, my name will be on that list. And I don't even have to agree with your initiative or referendum. So if I have this idea, I might think that's a terrible idea. But if you want help getting that before the people and navigating that process, my name will be on that list of local residents who are willing to help with that. And the threshold currently. So first off, there's not the guidance, so there's no required help. There's no required list of people who will help. The guidance is not in the charter itself. It's buried in state regs. And the threshold is different. So if you were to go around and collect signatures, you would need to get signatures from 15% of registered voters, which is a lot higher than the lowered threshold. And the third piece of 3 is that currently I'm very thankful that the city of Oak Ridge doesn't just make almost every ordinance passed through emergency, passed as an emergency ordinance. There are cities that do this. Our state certainly does this, and it's very unfortunate because there's a 30-day look back period before an ordinance takes effect, and that's designed for everyone who would be affected by the ordinance to if like, hey, I'm not okay with this at all. That's your period to organize a citizen referendum on the ordinance. How your referendum is worded actually matters. So if you word it poorly, if there's not expertise in how to do that, then you could technically in that 30 days get before the people's signatures to say, hey, we're going to stop this, and you can have that enthusiasm of we're going to get this reversed. And the council may reply, but oh, okay, well, so we don't have to use that exact method that you just blocked. we'll just we'll just implement it this way, and then you'd have the same process again. But if the council currently passes something by emergency, that eliminates that 30-day look back period. That's significant. That's that way within state law as well. So the new charter not only requires that in order for an ordinance to be passed, that there has to be a 2/3 majority and a separate vote saying, yes, this is an emergency, and the charter actually clarifies what an emergency is. So it's an emergency by these criteria of what an emergency is. That's to preserve the 30-day look back period. But it also even grants a 30-day look back period for emergency measures but for which the city is not obligated to recompense a citizen if the citizen is negatively affected during that 30-day period. That's one of the reasons why cities often will do an emergency ordinance, is to say, let's get this passed. Oh, these citizens may be negatively affected, but who cares? So the new charter is really oriented toward preserving that potential for citizens to do a referendum, to use that referendum process with some expert guidance, to be able to say, let's structure the referendum well so that it blocks a lot, and if that needs to be the case. And just like the Star Voting initiative that is now before the voters, referendums and initiatives don't by themselves block the efficiency of council. So if the concern is not just citizen involvement, it's important, but also the efficiency of government, it's important to realize that a referendum or initiative process doesn't prevent the city from operating efficiently. So when you go get the signatures and it puts that on the ballot before the people to say, all right, what do the citizens think about this? Much like the Star Voting initiative, it's when the Charter Review Committee said, hey, our charter can establish how voting takes place.
Which it does, because the city has control over their own municipal elections.
Yes.
So the Charter Review Committee is reviewing the old charter and how we elect our elected officials.
Yep.
And then found that there's a better way.
Yep, that there's a better way to do this. And the Charter Review Committee didn't say, hey, so let's implement this. The Charter Review Committee said, hey, let's get this before the voters.
And just to get back to your original question, it was already a right that people had. This just changes the threshold to be more in line with what's common. That was a lot of detail. Thanks.
A lot of detail, but probably too much. But
Very interesting. I didn't know any of that, so thank you.
Sure.
Well, if there are no more questions on the charter, and we can always go back at the end, I'll turn it over to Sarah to explain Star Voting and how it works. But again, this was an initiative from the Charter Review Committee that was recommended to City Council, and then City Council said, yeah, we think the voters should be able to decide whether or not they want to try Star Voting for a trial period. Now, turn it over to Sarah.
All right, so on your seats, those of you who are in person, you should have a ballot where you can vote on something really important. Which animal makes the best pet? And there are some phenomenal candidates ranging from cat and dog all the way down to rat and python. For those of you online, you can scan this QR code or go to equal.vote/pet and vote in the exact same election. So we want to give everyone a chance to just try this out without overthinking it. And it turns out that when we have multiple options on the ballot, sometimes we do have a more nuanced opinion rather than just you know, dog is the best and all other pets are equally bad. Sometimes you want to be able to show your preferences and also how much or how little you like those animals. Or candidates, in the case of Oak Ridge election.
You're showing folks online the ballot. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I can show this ballot on my screen here. So it's got the instructions right there. Essentially, you want to start by giving your favorite candidate 5 stars. Then give your last choice 0 or leave them blank. Equal scores are allowed. And score other candidates as desired. So there are a lot of different ways people might fill out their ballot. You might want to vote just the way you do now in current elections and give your favorite 5 stars and leave everybody else blank and move on with your day. If you want to do that with star voting, that's totally allowed. If you want to show even preference order, you can score your candidates 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. If there's a couple that you really like, but this one's your favorite, you can be more nuanced and say 5 stars for your favorite, 4 stars for a pretty good next choice. And if you really want to show who's your worst case scenario and differentiate between those bottom of the barrel candidates, you've got the option to give 1 star or 2 stars and show, you know, I really don't like this candidate, but if push came to shove, they're better than, you know, fish or whatever your last place might be.
What if we like 2 pets exactly the same amount?
And you can give them the exact same score. So, spoiler alert, I'm gonna give dog and cat both 5 stars. I really love them. I've had the world's best of each of them, and there's just no choosing between my little dog and Tiger. So from there, I'm gonna share my screen and get into a presentation here. And if you have any questions that I haven't answered, we're gonna get more in depth about star voting and how it's counted a little later. So feel free to wait and learn more and fill it out or go for it now. But we're gonna start with the biggest question, which is why change Oak Ridge elections? So currently here in Oak Ridge, candidates can win office without majority support. Now, some candidates may well have majority support, that's fantastic. But if there's multiple candidates running for the same seat, it's a pretty common thing just in elections in general for somebody to win with 20%, 30%, 40% of the vote. And that really doesn't give that candidate a strong mandate. Another problem is, or kind of the same problem, but more detail, is that Oak Ridge currently doesn't have a primary election. And that's because making candidates run 2 separate elections just isn't practical for a city of this size, especially since our city council and mayor are volunteer positions. It wouldn't be practical to host 2 elections, pay for 2 whole elections, make candidates pay for 2 whole campaigns. But having a single election with no primary and then general is just less accurate than a 2-round process. So Oak Ridge really needs to be able to elect officials all in one election as we do now, without a primary, but we need a more accurate system to be able to do that and get really good, strong winners consistently every single time. And the problem there is a phenomenon in elections called vote splitting or the spoiler effect. And what that is where a majority faction can actually run multiple candidates and split the vote between similar candidates on their side. So when that happens, it can end up electing a candidate who the voters actually didn't support. So for an example, we've got classic good versus evil, Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker. And as we can see, a majority of voters are good guys. And if there's only those two candidates, like on the left, Luke Skywalker wins easily, he has 60%. But if all of a sudden 5 more good guys join the race, then that majority coalition can end up divided and conquered and allow Darth Vader to win, even though he only has 31% of the vote. So we can absolutely do better. There are a number of voting methods out there that better ensure majority preferred winners whenever possible. And that's just one thing that we might want to consider. So at the Equal Vote Coalition, we have these 5 principles of what makes a voting method good. And we use these principles to evaluate the different options out there. So elections should be simple. It should be easy to vote, easy to tally, easy to audit, and transparent. And our current system is pretty good on all of those fronts, but it starts to struggle when you get into these other considerations. We also want it to be to empower honest voting. So it should be safe to vote your conscience, and it should actually be incentivized to show your honest opinion. That should be like the best, smartest, strongest way to vote is to research candidates, put it all down there, and you've done your due diligence. But in order to do that, we also need a ballot that's expressive enough for voters to show a more nuanced opinion, especially if there are more than 2 candidates on the ballot.
Right, because my guess is, there's 5 people on the ballot right now for 3 positions. My guess is you may have strong opinions on a couple of those candidates. Your 3rd vote may be up in the air. Star voting allows you to, give 5 stars to your favorite candidate, less stars to the other candidates.
Yeah, so in terms of what makes a ballot expressive, there's kind of 2 different things. There's, are you able to show your preference order, first choice, second choice, third choice, and so on. That's helpful. But it's also helpful to be able to show how much or how little you like those candidates. Is your second choice as good as your favorite, or almost as good as your favorite, or is your second choice really a lesser evil candidate and you're only supporting them because they seem electable and they've raised the most money and there's somebody way worse out there? That's not a calculation voters should have to make. And with more accurate voting methods, that can be a thing of the past. So obviously we want our elections to be accurate. And what we mean by that is accurately reflecting the will of the people as best as possible. So if there is a candidate who's broadly supported, who has strong support and broad support and best represents the people overall in a given place, that person should win in that place. And of course, last but not least, your vote should be equal. My vote should be just as powerful as yours, no matter how many candidates run or any other factor. And unfortunately, our current system does have some issues where the system itself can make a good guy in that previous example, their vote's just less powerful. And that's why even though they have a majority, they can't win. So an equally weighted vote is the legal definition of one person, one vote, set up by our federal constitution, and the Supreme Court has upheld it. So ensuring that my vote is just as powerful as yours is really important, and it's something that better voting methods absolutely can and should do. So the Charter Reform Commission committee has recommended star voting to the ballot unanimously. And they, as we went over, spent 2 years studying the city charter to identify areas we can do better. And measures 20-363, the charter reform measure, and measure 20-364, the star voting preference voting measure. Both of those were unanimously recommended to help set Oak Ridge up for success going forward. And then both of them had to be referred to the voters and kind of rubber stamped by City Council as well. So City Council is like, yes, we want the voters to have a chance to consider this, and away we go. So before I get into the details, I want to just get a couple of FAQs out of the way. Star voting is one person, one vote. Your ballot counts as one vote, and the finalist with the most votes wins. So in a very classic traditional sense, it's one person, one vote, just like the current system. There also would be no cost to the city. Funding for voter education and implementation would come from grants, potentially from the state or from nonprofit sources, but there would be no cost to the city itself.
Should also be mentioned that your help thankfully did not cost the city any money.
Right.
We're not paying you.
Yeah, our nonprofit is very much dedicated to making sure people have the information to sort through something like election reform and election science, that really the devil's in the details, and so that's what we do. This also is a pilot project, so it's not a charter amendment in itself. Voters would, if people vote yes and the star voting measure passes, then we would use star voting for 3 election cycles and then decide if we want to keep it.
So we go back to the voters at the end of those 3 election cycles to decide if we want to put it in the city charter permanently.
Right. So
Would that be voting on in 2030 or 2032?
likely 2030. Because our election cycles are every 2 years. Also, star voting is secure and it is simple to tally. It's just addition. So it's already compatible with all best practices and also with our existing elections infrastructure here in Oregon, here in Lane County. So there would be no new equipment needed. We don't have to like overhaul our auditing processes or anything like that. It's just naturally compatible with simple updates. And it does guarantee full transparency of election results. So one of the benefits of having voters show more information on their ballots is that we have really fabulous data besides who won from star voting. And the measure actually explicitly guarantees that that additional information on the election results would be published. Which hopefully would have happened anyway, but it's nice to have it written in there for transparency. So getting to it, how does star voting work? It really works like a primary and a general election all in one. First, we find the 2 strongest candidates overall for each seat. Second, we elect the finalist who is preferred by the majority. And as you saw when you tried it for yourself, we start out with a simple 5-star ballot, like a 5-star rating. The instructions again are to give your favorite candidate or favorites 5 stars. Then give your last choice or last choices 0 or leave them blank. Blank is the same as 0. Equal scores are allowed. So as we see here, this voter gave Andre 5 stars, that's their favorite. Gave Blake 0 stars, that's their absolutely last choice. Carmen and David are both pretty great options at 4 stars. And then score other candidates as desired. The last candidate, they decided to give 1 star. So yeah, 5 best, 0 worst, vote your conscience. And ballots are counted in a 2-step process. Star actually stands for score then automatic runoff, and that's exactly how it works. So you've got a scoring round, which finds the 2 highest scoring candidates. Those are your finalists. And then the finalists advance to the next round. So in this example, let's say Carmen and David were the most, or Carmen and Blake were the most popular candidates overall. They were the highest scoring. So they advanced to the automatic runoff. And then in the runoff, you're looking at each voter's ballot again and saying, which finalist did you prefer? So in this example, their favorite, Andre, didn't make the runoff, but they gave Blake 1 star and Carmen 4 stars. So this counts as a vote for Carmen. This voter prefers Carmen. And then the finalist with the most votes wins. So you get a pretty familiar type of election result in which you get a majority preferred winner whenever possible.
Is it possible to go back 2 slides just so people can see the original ballot? And then work through what you said again?
Sure, although I don't want to over explain because that can be more confusing. But just to quickly summarize, you score your candidates from 5 stars best to 0 stars worst. You can give candidates equal scores and score the other candidates as desired. The 2 highest scoring candidates overall are going to be your finalists who advance the automatic runoff. And an automatic runoff works pretty much like a runoff in a general election that's pretty familiar from our current system, where your vote goes to the finalist you prefer. The only difference here is that that happens automatically because you've already showed your preferences.
So in other words, even though this voter's first choice, Andre, didn't make it, they still got a say between the 2 finalists.
And I'm going to get into
Yeah,
that more on the next slide too. So there are a couple things at work here that I think really help the 5-star system excel at finding great winners. So first off, the 5-star ballot itself has been found to be really the best in class way to measure public opinion. And that's why it has been used, like a 5-star rating all over the world, for millions and millions of people. It allows you to show both your preference order and your level of support. It's also the best for cognitive load, which is like, how difficult is this for a voter going through the process? Are they really, having to grind the gears, or is it an intuitive thing? And the 5-star rating's been found to be like right in that sweet spot where it's nuanced enough that you can fully express yourself, but not so, it's not like 0 to 100 where, it's really like more than we actually need. Studies show that human opinion generally is in the realm of like 5 or 6 different points of like differentiation. But we don't tend to have a more nuanced preference than that. And then the other advantage of the 5-star ballot is that it's just addition. It's essentially scoring and you add up the scores. And that makes it very, very compatible with just like logistics of running a good, secure, accurate, simple, transparent election and complying with our current election codes. So the top 2 runoff also has some massive advantages. So what the runoff there does is it ensures that honesty is the best policy for you as a voter. Strategically, if you're a strategic voter, you play chess in your spare time, maybe you even play Go or other games like that, and you really want to try and game the system, and you're like, what's the best way to vote? The best way to vote is to just follow the instructions. Give 5 stars to your favorite, show your honest preference order between the other candidates. And that's what ensures that in that runoff, no matter who those finalists are, your full vote is going to go to the finalist you prefer. So it just incentivizes the voter behavior that we want, which is honest. It's also ensures that it's classic 1-person vote. Ultimately, your full vote goes to the finalist you prefer, just like a top 2 general election if it wasn't all at once. And the runoff ensures that if your favorite can't win, your vote still makes a difference. So in the previous example, as James was pointing out, right now, voters who win are like, yay, my candidate won, this is fantastic. But a lot of people go away from elections feeling like they lost, feeling like maybe the election elected their worst case scenario and their voice really didn't make a difference. And that can be very disillusioning, uninspiring. It's one of the main reasons when we go out on the street and talk to people who say, I don't vote, a lot of people say, my vote's not going to make a difference anyway. It's all a foregone conclusion. So with star voting, even if your favorite can't win, your vote helps prevent your worst case scenario and get you better representation than you would have otherwise. So that helps you as a voter, even if you're in the minority. And it helps find more consensus supported candidates overall, so that we don't have wild swings in policy from one administration to the next, because it's consensus elections, or more consensus, I should say. And then, again, no matter what scores you gave to those finalists, your full vote, it's still your one person, one vote, and it goes to the finalist you prefer. So just to sum it up one more time, star voting works like basic addition. You add the stars, then you add up the votes. And that is my last slide. I have more slides for Q&A, but do we have any questions from the audience? How about the audience online?
There are two on there. One was if Lane County was still tallying our ballots.
Oh, great. Yeah, so Lane County Clerk is legally responsible for tallying the elections for all of Lane County. So they would be still responsible for either doing that or delegating that authority. So technically it is possible, if we wanted to, that Oak Ridge could tally their own star voting elections themselves using like a hand count because of that scale. And that would, that's one option, but the more likely option would be that their current election administration tools would just get a star voting software update, and Lane County Elections would then certify that upgrade, and then use it, essentially use the same process that we currently have.
Sarah, I have a question. I have a couple questions. I was referencing some questions that were on the social media posts online.
Okay.
Things that I saw come up regularly, and I think this ties into what you were just saying. Some citizens were concerned about the legal ramifications, being sued. It's not on the up and up. It's not, real. It's, because when you think of 5 stars, you think of preschool sometimes. I mean, it's also in everything else that we review. But with that said, does this, you said earlier that this complies with all the current voting laws. Are there any type of legal ramifications that could come back on the city or county or state if we were to have star voting get approved on the ballot?
There are not. And I'm glad you asked that, because that has been a concern. I think that's a really valid question. But star voting, in order to be to become a ballot initiative, which it has been a ballot initiative around the state a number of times, it has to go through a legal review process. And it has always passed that legal review process with flying colors, with no challenges. And star voting was actually the subject of a statewide ballot initiative. And that's an even more rigorous process. And I think there were over 24 statewide initiatives that were filed this last cycle. Star voting actually made it through the fastest and was the first one approved. Oregon's constitution is explicit that you can allow voters to show their preferences. It's right in there. And star voting just, it not only complies with Oregon's election laws, it passes with flying colors. So, and one of the ways that it excels so well is by eliminating that vote splitting and spoiler effect, which actually ensures that every voter has an equally powerful vote, no matter how many candidates are in the race. That's something that our federal constitution guarantees as nearly as is practicable, but previous voting methods have done like the best they could, and it hasn't been perfect. And so that's kind of squeaked through as as good as we can do, but star voting actually 100% guarantees an equally weighted vote.
And there are other voting methods out there that do have legal issues, and
Mhm.
for instance, ranked choice.
That was my
It's
next
illegal in
question.
some states.
What's the difference?
And
Yeah.
often gets confused with star voting, and that's why the Charter Review Committee, we looked at other ways, other alternative voting methods.
And I
Didn't like it.
I can get into that a little bit. So when people think about preference voting and alternative voting methods, some people have never heard of the concept. And star voting might be your first exposure. But a lot of people have heard of something called ranked choice voting, where you rank your candidates in order of preference. The pitch, the way it would have been described to you is almost identical, but the mechanics are completely different. So star voting is just addition. Ranked choice voting is elimination rounds where votes transfer kind of in some ways like a shell game, and it can actually waste votes in the process. So it'll eliminate candidates and then also eliminate voters who weren't able to transfer. So that's why we don't support ranked choice voting. And Oregon law also has a lot of issues with ranked choice voting just because of its own mechanics. So there is a statewide bill, Measure 117, that would implement ranked choice voting if it passes for some of the statewide and federal offices, the executive ones. And in order to do that, it requires fully centralizing all ballots statewide. It strikes a giant chunk of current Oregon election law that guarantees election security and transparency and auditability. It just removes all those requirements right off the top. So all of those were considered deal breakers by the majority of the electoral reform community and definitely by the electoral science community. So a lot of people have been saying, you know, yes, ranked choice voting has better name recognition, but devil's in the details. We don't want to sacrifice the good things about elections in order to, you know, get some of these other benefits. We can get those benefits without making those sacrifices. So that's why star voting has really risen to the top, definitely in the academic circles and in the advocacy circles as well, generally, though it is being outspent compared to ranked choice by millions to one. So star voting's, this is not a big money thing. It's something that the Charter Commission did of their own accord. Our nonprofit is also small and mostly volunteer run. But it's important to get it right on these things. So we're happy to be doing the work.
That was the other huge concern that the Charter Review Committee had with ranked choice in particular, is the high likelihood for spoliation. I can never say that word, but basically having your ballot thrown out. And if you don't follow directions precisely in ranked choice, your ballot's just tossed out. No vote. Whereas star voting, like Sarah said, if you just want to do it the old school way and put one candidate 5-star, you're done, leave the rest blank, that's fine. Your vote still counts. You want to give everybody 3 stars, that's fine. You know, your vote still counts. You wouldn't be showing preference, but your ballot isn't thrown out. Everybody still gets the 3 stars. So it's not thrown out. And we realize this is confusing and it's new. And we don't want to see people's votes get thrown.
Yeah, so it's really important for us that a new system like this be absolutely user friendly. So that as voters are getting used to the system, your vote will always count. So you can draw a giant smiley face on your ballot in Sharpie and mess it up, but it's almost impossible to accidentally void your ballot to star voting. It's actually harder than the current system because you are allowed to show support for multiple candidates, which is the most common voter error currently. Okay.
Okay, so one of the other things that I've seen is why start in Oak Ridge?
Mhm.
Why use it for city council? And some would say that this is just a popularity contest. So why should we use it for Oak Ridge City Council? Why should we even consider voting yes on the ballot?
That popularity
Yeah, so-
question drives me crazy because that's what elections are.
I am speaking
Yes, I know.
with the people.
Okay.
So
Like,
Oak Ridge is a perfect place to adopt star voting because necessity is the mother of invention. Most cities in Oregon have a 2-round process. They have a primary and then they have a general election. And so even with basic choose one voting, that helps narrow it down to a smaller group, and then the voting method's able to usually find the best winner in that general election. But Oak Ridge doesn't have 2 elections. We've only got 1 election in November, and we've only got, and there are a lot of disadvantages to doing 2 elections. It's like, it's something that we do currently because we need our elections to be more accurate. But it's very expensive. It's a huge waste of taxpayer money. It's a huge barrier to entry for candidates, especially working class candidates who might want to run for office without quitting their day job or dedicating their entire year to running for an office that doesn't pay anything, and maybe they are not even going to win. So this just makes it way more accessible to have good local candidates step up and run for office and then win if they really are the best candidate for the job.
and honestly, when people ask why Oak Ridge, why don't we let somebody else lead the way? Why not? I'm tired of people, when I talk to people in Eugene telling me, oh yeah, Oak Ridge, you guys are like 30 years behind the times. Well, let's lead the way on something. And, this is a funky, cool town. I'm a little bit weird. We're probably all a little bit weird. That's why we're here. So yeah, let's lead the way and do something new and be in front of something. That really, I think this is the way of the future. Let's lead the way rather than just following along and maybe 30 years we'll do it after everyone else tries it. Let's do it.
And I'll add one thing, all over the state, all over the country, even in some other countries, committees have looked into voting method reform and which voting method should be upgraded to. And those committees almost always choose star voting and recommend star voting. So that's something that we've seen. The Portland Charter Reform Commission, their subcommittee that did the deep dive on Portland's voting method reform recommended star voting, but the larger committee didn't go with that because of a lot of bureaucratic type reasons. There was a horse trade that happened. So big cities have a lot of bureaucracy and red tape and other considerations that are holding them back. Whereas a small town like Oak Ridge can actually be really nimble. And if something's a good idea, they've done the due diligence and it's recommended, they can just do it.
And it should also be mentioned, this is absolutely nonpartisan. This isn't sponsored by the Democrats, the Republicans, the progressives. There's no party affiliation to this. And I know some people on Facebook have said, well, I saw star voting sign next to Trump sign. So is it conservative? Oh, I saw a sign next to a Harris sign. So is it liberal? It's not. In fact, if anything, it's neither of the major parties, because it actually kind of lets betters the chances of like third party candidates to get in. I don't know. Personally,
It has been, star voting has actually been either endorsed, adopted, or used by almost all of our political parties here in Oregon. So this is a remarkably nonpartisan issue. The idea that our elections should be fair, that our votes should be equal, that our winners should be representative. It's really no-brainer stuff that anyone can get behind. And I've been working on this really actively for the last 7 years. And volunteering in this space for about a dozen years. And it's been incredible, the people that I've gotten to work with in the voting reform space, because they are from all across the political spectrum. It doesn't always come up because we're trying to stay mission focused. But then when we get together after for a drink, we're like, wow, I had no idea that you thought this or that. And it, yeah, so especially in these hyper polarizing times, it's heartening to find an issue that is really pan-partisan. Third parties like it, as James said, but also Democrats and Republicans really like it because it can help them combat polarization within their own parties. I think both major parties have really struggled with just having two-party domination, and that means they have to be a big tent and welcome in people to their party that they don't actually agree with, that are disruptive and derailing. So with something like star voting, we would still have probably the major parties, but we would have some minor parties, and we'd have politicians who could actually tell you what they think instead of, you know, stump the party line that they don't actually believe in, because that's what they have to do to win.
Either stump the party line, or in an election like ours, our current system incentivizes non-answers. So our current system, because you're either going to get a vote yes, or you're going to lose a vote of, yeah, I'm not going to vote for him or her. If you can keep your answers as rah-rah as possible and as nondescript as possible, you're more likely to win the current, basically, popularity contest of the voting. In star voting, it shifts that. So for each question, if it's a question where some people in the audience care passionately about it, and it's not likely to really alienate anybody, it becomes more strategic for candidates to actually answer the question, which because voters then get, someone might say, oh, that's an issue that I'm passionate about. I'm gonna rate that person a 5 because he cares about my vote. And then on the next question, different group. Oh, that's a question. That's something I really feel passionate about. Well, I'm also gonna vote a 4 or 5 to her because she supports that issue that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, I can add a little bit.
Yeah.
So since star voting was invented in 2014, it's now been the subject of a number of peer-reviewed articles. And in every study that's looked at voting reform, star voting has topped the charts. First, in terms of accuracy, electing the winner who best represents the will of the people. That's something that can be modeled across thousands of scenarios and 2 parties, 5 parties, 3 candidates, 15 candidates, 37 candidates. And across all sorts of scenarios, star voting is among the most accurate voting methods out there, and by far the most accurate that's actually on the table and legally viable. It also topped the charts in terms of resiliency to strategic voting, or actively incentivizing honest voting. That was one of the things that won me over when I first learned about it. And a recent study measured candidate incentive distribution, which is really fascinating. So in the current system, a candidate has a really strong advantage to reach out to their base of voters, their core supporters, and not even their entire core. So people who are definitely going to vote for them, they can pretty well write them off and just focus on people who are their likely voters, where hopefully they can win their vote. And they can absolutely demonize the other side. They can absolutely ignore all sorts of voters who really have no leverage. So most voters have almost no accountability over politicians. But with star voting, the incentive to reach out to different types of voters in your community is almost a flat line, completely even. So for me as a candidate, if I can convince you to go from 0 stars, I hate you, to 1 or 2 stars, you're not the worst. Like, at least I can respect you, but we disagree. that's as valuable as moving somebody from 3 stars, sure, meh, to my favorite. So, yeah, it's really incredible how much more leverage it gives the everyday voter, and how candidates are really elected to govern their entire jurisdiction, in this case Oak Ridge, instead of just their little faction of core supporters.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so speaking of Oak Ridge being the forefront of this, let's say we start a movement and it sweeps the country, and we come up on our presidential election, and Oregon doesn't have like a huge amount of electoral votes. So I've always been one of those voters that feels like my vote doesn't really count. So how will star voting, if again, it sweeps the country, we get it into like the big elections,
Yeah.
how would that change my vote as an Oregonian?
Massively. So I'm glad you asked for this, because earlier we were talking about legal viability and we're worried about lawsuits or whatever. Not only is star voting absolutely legal and constitutional in Oregon, but unlike other alternatives out there, star voting is already legal and constitutional in all 50 states. So that means that if it does catch on here in Oregon and sweep the nation like wildfire, and everyone's using star voting from everything from dog catcher up to president, it works. Star voting scales fantastically. And again, that's just because it's counted with simple addition. That makes it way more effective to do across county lines, across state lines. And for our presidential elections, both major parties, both the Democrats and the Republicans, have lost the presidency due to vote splitting and spoiler effect. In 1996,
Ross Perot.
Ross Perot split the vote, was demonized as the spoiler, and I think it was Bill Clinton didn't actually have a true majority, but he was able to win anyway because of that. Then in 2000, the opposite happened with Ralph Nader and Al Gore splitting the vote and electing George Bush Sr. So if we had star voting, would Clinton or Bush Sr. have still won? Maybe. But if they had won, they would have had a majority mandate, and they would have had a much stronger position to lead our country from, instead of going into our presidents, going into office with this divided people who, don't think you even deserve to be there. So that's another thing in terms of, maybe we would have found a better winner. I don't want to comment on that, because we don't have the data of, did people, how popular was Ross Perot if everyone had been able to vote their conscience. So my mom, whenever she watches my presentation, she's like, you forgot to say my favorite point. And that is that with star voting, when you're looking at the results, you get this amazing bar graph, which, let me share this one more time. You get this amazing bar graph like we see on the left, which shows not only was Carmen the highest scoring candidate overall, but we can see Blake was almost as high, and this third, fourth, and fifth candidate, we know exactly how much support they really had. So with our current system, we really don't know for those losing candidates, were they just awful and nobody liked them whatsoever, or did people just think they weren't electable and kind of write them off? So that's really important data that we need, especially for local elections, so that candidates who maybe don't win on their first try know whether or not they should try again. And it turns out, the public's perception of electability, who are the front runners, who do we think can win? It's not always accurate. Star voting would give us the real data.
And without that data, that sense of electability can become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mhm.
That Oh, the person I have my conscience for, but
Right, yeah, currently, the people who are seen as most electable are traditionally the ones who've raised the most money. The ones with the best name recognition, and most of all, the incumbents, people who have already been in office. So it really makes it hard for new voices to step up and win, even if people are really unhappy with politics as it is. Yeah,
Perhaps question,
sure.
I live in the city limits.
And
Has star voting ever been voted in? And if somebody goes with it in a community or city for a while and they decide they don't like it and they vote it back out, has that ever happened?
No, star voting's never been repealed, not by a city and not by a group either.
Okay,
There are some groups who've tried it and used it as like a one-off. And then they wanted to like try different things before solidifying on their favorite. But yeah, star voting has never been repealed to date, and we hope it doesn't.
but the way we have it set up is this is a trial period for 3 elections. So
okay.
it would automatically go away. We don't like it. But we'll vote on it at that 3rd election. Do we want to keep this and put it in the charter? Correct.
I have one more quick question.
Sure.
You don't have to answer it, you don't want to. You mentioned something about that you're the president,
Mhm.
you don't have to answer that.
Um,
I don't know if you meant.
oh, So-
My dad taught dogs in Oak Ridge, Oregon from 68. And I'm not, no, I don't understand, you don't have to. If you don't want-
so what I mean is that,
But what, that he didn't
it's-
count, he was hired by the city of Oak Ridge.
no, that's not what I meant, but what I meant is that star voting scales really well. So it's a great choice for small local offices or even hiring committees and that type of thing. It's a great way to choose anybody for any position. From a local hire, like I think Oak Ridge actually already used it for the hiring committee to
We did.
hire
Our finance director.
the finance director. So that's a very small scale election. But it also scales well and works great for larger jurisdictions statewide and on up to presidential elections. So one of the reasons we recommend star voting is not just that we think it's a great fit for here, but ideally we'd like to see everywhere have better elections and ideally have one consistent system so that voters don't have to navigate a different thing every time they move. So we do want something that is going to work all over the place, not just here.
Yeah, certainly no offense to dog catchers.
Pardon me?
Certainly no offense.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah,
I wish we had 5.
I wish I don't. Neither one did it.
I still have the record for every dog and cat you put to sleep.
It was just simply saying in some places, animal control could be an elected position.
And some, I mean, you've seen your ballot. Sometimes there's like, precinct committee person for Ward 8. And you're like, I didn't even know who this was, or like
Yeah,
E-Web board member. And
I think that's a saying too. I've heard it said before.
Do we have any other questions?
Nothing updated.
I don't have a question, but, I think James brought up that reuses and design on. Great people, it's our higher, yeah, so it's something very well utilized.
It's a Yelp process, it's an Amazon process. it's a
Right.
lot of
But I mean, as
process.
far
Yeah,
as like hiring,
Mhm.
local,
yeah,
it's,
it's a great
yeah.
review process and it's
Yeah.
widely used.
It's true. Yeah, my dad was a professor and they used the system where they do, hold up the number of fingers. And they'd make faculty decisions with a 5-star rating as well. This scoring system. So, yeah, it is very widely used. It's not a novel idea. Again, the 5-star rating is the gold standard for measuring public opinion. And this is just applying that to elections.
And there is, on the ballot that I just got, I had someone call me and ask me about it. So there's there's the ranked choice on the ballot, which is the measure 117. And then at the very bottom, there's the Oak Ridge star voting as well. So
Right.
on the ballot, there's actually two separate voting systems. One is nation, one is city, correct?
Right.
And one is state.
Or one is state.
Well,
For
one is
some
city.
state.
Yeah. So,
Just for people
yeah,
who didn't
and
want to get
our
them confused.
nonprofit is recommending no on measure 117, yes on star voting for Oak Ridge, or preference voting for Oak Ridge. And just one last thing, I think we've got 2 minutes left before the end. I want to show you our Oak Ridge website for people who want to learn more on their own. And when I say Oak Ridge website, I mean actually the Oak Ridge Star Voting site. So if you go to starvoting.org/Oak Ridge, you can find this lovely page here, and it's got some quick links. So Oak Ridge Star Voting FAQ has a ton of frequently asked questions. You can request a lawn sign if you're getting jealous because your neighbors have one, but you don't have one. You can read the ballot title. So this is what's actually going to be on your ballot, what you're going to see. Allow voters to show preferences between candidates for city elections. You can read the initiative text itself if you're a details person. So this is the resolution with the, whereas star voting enables elections to produce outcomes that more closely reflect the preferences of the voters and so on. You can read all of that. Yeah, and even support the cause, because again, this will be no cost to voters. We're going to be doing some grassroots fundraising for voter education. And Equal Vote Coalition is going to be partnering with the city of Oak Ridge to guarantee robust, really good, on the ground, in-person voter education and top tier resources available to everyone if this does pass. So again, that's something that'll get paid for elsewhere. No cost to Oak Ridge, but we will be making sure it happens. So that's not a corner that you want to cut. And it goes into effect when funding is secured. So worst case scenario, if we can't afford to do it right, it doesn't just get pushed through badly. It would pause until the election cycle where it's fully funded and the infrastructure that's needed is in place, and then it would go into effect. And there's some great videos, and then if you go up higher, there's a lot more. There's articles, videos, podcasts, interviews, press, about us, the Equal Vote Coalition. You can actually host an election. You can try star voting for yourself at bettervoting.com. And yeah, there's a lot of great resources out there for people to get familiar with it and see if you like it before you vote.
You're welcome to play the video if you want to, or people can just go on.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're at 1 minute to go and it's a 4-minute video. Do you guys want to watch a quick video that explains the exact same thing I already explained, but
No.
more
It's a good
scripted?
recap. It's a good recap. You guys are tight on your schedules.
Maybe go
Like,
with the
oh, one
show
more
next
minute.
year.
Or the nods and shakes of heads.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
But-
guys so much for coming out.
Mhm. But if you do want to explain it to a friend and you don't want to have to give my speech, this website's a great resource for you to pass it on to the next person. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
doing
you.
it. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jacob and Matt and James. Thank you.
James, question for you.
A final question did actually just come in on the stream. Will we receive just the final results or do we see the breakdown of the 2 rounds?
See the full breakdown,
Ooh,
guaranteed. It's right there in the in the language, the legal language, guarantees full transparency of the anonymous results. So everything short of who voted for who.
Well, that's in the Lane County election.
It wouldn't.
It
When they
would,
show us who wins.
it doesn't specify exactly where, but I assume it would be on the Oak Ridge City website as well
Oh,
as the
yeah,
Lane
that-
County. So that'd probably be a redirect link or something, but it would be published, it'd be there. And that guarantees that.
But they'll have the certified data. I don't see why they wouldn't put it on there. Because we definitely will. It's public information, and this system can do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, sounds good. Sarah, can you go back to your slide deck real quick? There was